Inviting everybody to join us today. I'm so excited. Good evening. Welcome to our webinar, Cultural Competency in Small Business. I am Jebeh Edmunds, the founder and CEO of Jebeh Cultural Consulting. And I am so excited to have in our guest chairs today for this amazing discussion of how we can work together as a community and also to level up our small business practices. And we've got three exceptional guest speakers today, Aubrey Hagan, Whitney Harvey, and Shea Marlow. And before I get into their introductions, I want to give you some housekeeping items before we start. Please be sure to check the polls in our chat throughout our discussion to share your opinions of what it means to be culturally competent as a business leader. And we will check those responses during our webinar this evening. And of course, please, 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 if you're feeling something and you're liking what our panelists have to share, drop an emoji below so we can catch that vibe and keep it going. Now, another thing I want us to let you know is this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted on my YouTube channel, Mrs. Edmunds Cultural Corner. Now, to get top access to it before it goes live, be sure to sign up for our newsletter that drops every Friday, so then you get the first access to see the replay. So let's get started. Our first guest I want to introduce to you is Miss Aubrey Hagan. She's the Director of Membership Development and DEI at the Duluth Area Chamber of Commerce. She oversees various chamber events and the Fuse Duluth Young Professionals Program. She has spearheaded a successful launch of Chamber's Women in Leadership Conference, and that is going to be September 30th in Duluth, Minnesota. And I will also let you know in the comments that we have tickets available and your girl is the keynote speaker for the morning. So you have to check out this amazing opportunity if you are in our Twin Ports area. Our second guest, we have Whitney Harvey. She is the Senior Director of Workforce Diversity with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, Minnesota Diversity and Inclusion at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce since 2022. She leads initiatives to promote inclusive environments in Minnesota businesses. She also serves as the board president for Basic Needs, which is a local nonprofit, with her master's in healthcare administration, and her leadership is defined by diversity appreciation and community commitments. And she lives in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. Aubrey Hagan hails from Duluth, Minnesota. And last but not least, we also have in the guest chair, Shea Marlow. He brings valuable experience in DEI by being the DEI program manager and former diversity recruiter for the Minnesota Department of Human Services. He focuses on increasing hiring and retention of people of color in state government. Shea chairs the Men of African Heritage, ERG, at DHS and contributes to the governor's MLK Day Planning Council and mentors local Black youth through organizations like 100 Black Men in the Twin Cities chapter and the Doherty Family College Professional Mentorship Program over at St. Thomas. And like I said, these experts are going to give you so many actionable insights and strategies, and I am so excited for you to listen in today. So welcome, my favorite DEI practitioners.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, I'm so excited. So let's get into it. Our first question, I'm going to post it to you first, Aubrey, and the rest of you, I will introduce you to the next one coming up. So for question one, for all three, we'll start with Aubrey. How can small businesses leverage cultural competency to better understand and connect with their diverse customer bases?
Thank you, Jebeh. That's such a great question. So what I want to begin with saying is that I think it's really important to seek out education. So my personal DEI journey started just by sitting down with someone and asking, like, can you tell me your story? Because she was part of a community that we clearly weren't reaching. Her business wasn't a member of our chamber. And that really was a domino effect towards speaking with a lot of those stakeholders and having those really great one-on-one meetings. And then my next step was kind of seeking that formal DEI education where I actually hold a DEI certificate now. I would go to trainings, I would do webinars like this. So the fact that all of you are here is a really wonderful first step. But once you seek out that education, it gives you kind of a different lens to look through where you're really looking at maybe it's your products, maybe your service-based organization, and asking, is our messaging inclusive? Is it reaching the diverse populations we want to reach? If it's not, how can I tailor my outreach? So it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all model, especially when you're trying to reach people. So for example, I noticed that even when we were doing, like, I thought we were doing these really welcoming events where like everyone's gonna feel so great about coming to this event, you know, it's welcoming and it's awesome and the messaging is there. And I noticed that our people of color communities would not register unless I personally emailed them and said, hey, I think you'd love this event. 5 minutes later, they'd sign up. It was that personal invitation that made them feel welcome, that made them feel brought into the fold. Because otherwise, it might be really intimidating. You know, maybe they had never been to a chamber event, and we're still working on, you know, doing a better job of being diverse and welcoming. And they walk into a room and they see a bunch of people that don't look like them. That's really intimidating. But when they know, well, Aubrey's going to be there, and she personally invited me to this, and she told me I'll get value out of it, so I feel empowered now to go, that really makes all the difference. So thinking about how you can tailor your approach to make someone feel welcome in the fold, it's probably going to be different for a lot of different populations, but thinking, well, if I was that person, what would I want? I'd want a personal email saying, Aubrey, I think you'd really like this event. You should come.
Yeah.
So that's where I think you can really leverage that competency once you seek out some education and look through a DEI lens. You have to be really intentional with those kinds of strategies.
Yes, great. Same question for you, Whitney.
Yeah, I mean, Aubrey said, provided a lot of great examples and some background too about her DEI journey. I think, the biggest piece of advice I can give to, leaders is to get to know the community in which you operate and the community that you serve, right? And that will help you to kind of identify the ways in which you're, there's barriers or there's, issues in relaying information. I think, from a business perspective, it's getting curious, right? So be willing to step outside of your comfort zone and, as Aubrey said, engage in a conversation with people, learn something new, be curious and be, kind and respectful. The tailored kind of approach too, I think is really important. And as we kind of navigate the DEI space, I think we're realizing that taking kind of an individualized approach to an individual, an employee, a community member really yields the best results and strong relationships. And so if we can encourage people to think about the individual, get to know the individual, build that foundation of trust, and then educate the heck out of yourself, you're going to be on the right path.
Yes, thank you, Whitney. And Shea, what are your thoughts on this one? Yes.
Yeah, I'm just going to veggie back off of what my fellow panelists said. Being curious, building relationships, all these things lean into what Jebeh and I know very well, which is how to move into the IDI continuum and get into acceptance and adaptation, where you're really trying to be intentional about how you're fostering relationships across different diversities and cultures. Without that, if you're not being curious, if you're not being intentional about building relationships, then it can kind of seem like you're really in it for some other goal, whether it's profit or whether it's for just to make it sound like you checked the box. So you have to be truly intentional about how you're going about attracting these customers. So yeah, really lean into that. And it's okay to be, I'll call it out very early. It's okay to be uncomfortable, to even acknowledge that transparency. Hey, I've never done this before. Hey, I really could learn more about your culture, your community. And I'm trying to start with you. So making it personal, I think is a great way to let people know, like, you're trying. And as some people also say, if you're not failing, then you're not trying. So it's okay to, to step out of your comfort zone and fail sometimes too.
Yes, I love that. And the only way we can make growth is if we are uncomfortable. If we're comfortable, everything's good. I sent the invitation. You didn't get it, right? There's so many things that we could tweak and curate, like you said, friends, to an individual, going to them personally, researching what is the community that I am servicing around, and how can I, better attract and bring them in to make them feel comfortable and confident. Awesome. So our question number 2, we're going to start back with you, Shea, when we're talking about that ability to attract. In what ways does cultural competency impact small businesses for their ability to attract and retain diverse talent?
I appreciate this question a lot because you are talking in my world,
I know.
peanut butter and jelly. Just to be make sure I do call it something, though I'm no longer working in a recruitment capacity for state government. I am in a training capacity, so I'm now educating child welfare workers about how they can effectively be or show cultural humility when serving families across the 87 counties and 11 tribes in the state of Minnesota. So to that end, to the question, how we can impact and attract talent and retain them. Oftentimes individuals, I think companies overly invest in recruitment and not enough in retention.
That part.
Because I don't know, because they think like, well, as long as we're getting people in the door, we should be fine, but not realizing, well, how many people are going out the door too? So you have to look at both the checks and balances to see, are you keeping the people you bring in? That said, cultural competency does encourage you to start looking at the lens of the people you're bringing in the door or trying to attract, to say, what am I missing? What about your community? What about your culture? What about your perspective? Am I not, or we're not as a company, doing more to invest in? I think retention or even recruitment, I think of ERGs. As a former chair of the Men of African Heritage ERG, our focus was trying to attract men of color to work for state government. So we had to come with, again, the basis that even Aubrey hit on, which is relationships. Can I connect with my fellow men of color to say, hey, here's where I think you could add value to our organization? When I think of retention, not only can the ERGs help with that, but it's also, again, being more personable to educate. I also heard this mentioned earlier, supervisors on how they can relate and build relationships with their staff. It's great to get them in the door, but if they don't feel welcome and seen and heard when it comes to some of these interactions, they can totally feel like, you know what, I'm just here to check a box. I'm here just to do a job, but I'm not really seen as a whole person. So with that said, you have to be really intentional and say what spaces. We try to use words like brave space instead of safe space to say, what spaces am I making for my staff to be seen and heard on a daily or regular basis? But if people don't feel valued, they will definitely look for reasons to leave.
Yes. I love that. And even if folks, if you're not familiar with the acronym ERG, that's in terms of employee resource groups, which are vital to underrepresented groups in organizations and workplaces, where they can go to their cultural group for that brave space and a place to feel like they're not, by themselves. Wonderful. Whitney, also, what are your thoughts? Because I know you handle and work with a lot of small businesses with the Minnesota Chamber.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, I tend to lead with data around this one too. I think it's very evident that organizations who prioritize DEI work are, more innovative, have higher retention rates, have higher employee engagement and employee morale, and even higher financial performance than those who do not prioritize this work. So there really is a strong business imperative here. I think the word of mouth is also incredibly, powerful. And I have one particular business who I've worked closely with who, had a resident a Corinne individual come into their organization, and they made accommodations for this individual. They translated documents. They brought somebody on staff to help with language barriers, and now 20% of their workforce is Corinne. So good news travels fast, and I think people who feel welcomed and respected in the workplace and are given kind of the same amount of respect and dignity as others are going to stay for a long time, and they're going to work hard. I would be amiss if I didn't mention, here in Minnesota, we have some pretty powerful demographic changes as well happening. So our populations of color grew 32 times faster than the white populations over the last decade. We have negative net migration, domestic migration, and, positive net international migration. So people are leaving more than they're coming to our state. And so we really are growing more increasingly diverse. I think utilizing the resources that exist, there are really powerful refugee settlement agencies out there who are looking to educate and connect these individuals, whether it's to their path towards citizenship or to, professional opportunities. So, and a lot of organizations are going to provide them with the skills that they need. So really it's educating businesses too about not only the benefits, but what's possible from a professional standpoint. And I could go on about this forever, but I'm interested to hear what Aubrey wants to say.
Yes, take it away. Oh, these are so good. Aubrey, go ahead.
Well, I echo both of those sentiments, especially when Shea said that people invest so much in the recruitment part, because that's really like the biggest thing I see, where retention is not one size fits all. Neither is onboarding. Like when I started my job, I was barely onboarded and it was terrifying. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know who to ask. Oh my God. And thinking about being someone that like didn't look like everyone in the office, I would have been like dying 1,000 deaths, So when a new person came on, I had like a Bible of here's how to do everything in your job for her. And she I just remember she held it against her chest and she's like, this is great. Thank you for giving this to me. And she's reading it. It's like setting people up for success. And honestly, I went to an interview once and they gave me the questions ahead of time. And that was so nice. Yes. I had 15 minutes where I was like, I have time to write notes and be prepared. And I had just hired an intern recently and I didn't provide the questions ahead of time. And some of them, they were like, I'm going to need a second. I'm like, oh yeah, take all the time you need. And I had the questions already. I should have given them ahead of time. So when you experience something and say, wow, that really made life easier on me, like remember that and say, can I, log this away and use it in the future where I'm providing the interview questions? Because man, if it helped me, it would very likely help someone else. And thinking about like, what is inclusive onboarding? Because the way you onboard Aubrey to an organization is probably not going to be the same way that you onboard Jebeh or Shea or Whitney. It's like really like, what is this person's experience? What do they need? Like, are they like I need everything written down kind of person? Because sometimes people are visual. It's like, you need to show me on the computer. I'm not going to read your work Bible, Aubrey. Thankfully Lori liked the work Bible, but it's like, it's really asking, like, it's really meeting someone as an individual. I think we create processes and they get a little too formalized. Well, like, this is our onboarding process and this is what we do for retention. And it's not one size fits all. You really have to remember, like, I've worked for a company that treated me like a number and not a person. Yeah. And it was like one of my worst jobs. It was like, I got bronchitis and they were like, when are you going to be back? You have to get your reports in. And I was like, oh, okay. So I'm not a human being. I'm like a number. I'm a cog in the machine. I'm the reports doer. Like you have to make sure you're meeting people like a little more heart first than that. And just understanding people's humanity, and everyone has a different skill set, a different experience, different comfort levels. So really asking them, what do you need to succeed here? Like, do we ask people that when we hire? I don't remember asking, that's something that we can really implement. I remember reading one time that this Gen Zer went to an interview and the interview lady asked, what do you like to do for fun after she hired her? And she said, oh, I really like to play video games. She's like, great. I'm going to ask you what video games you're playing when we meet every month, and you can tell me about that because your hobbies are really important to me. And I thought that was really amazing. Like people-centered retention, people-centered efforts really make all the difference.
Yeah, I love that. And accommodating, seeing them who they are. And a lot of our procedures and policies are so outdated, and to update that and to audit that and to see, what works for one individual does not necessarily work for someone else. And how can we pivot that? That's great. All right, Whitney, this next one, you're going to start with this answer for number 3. Can you share some success stories of small businesses that you've worked with or have observed who have effectively integrated cultural competency into their marketing and business development strategies?
Yeah, absolutely. I know I just shared a really great example of this, but I have another one too that I would be happy to share. So there was one business, actually a small business, I think just around 100 employees, and they employ a big population of immigrants. And so what they did was, one, create a space where they can, speak to their employees and identify, what barriers are you experiencing, what challenges are you having, and they've created kind of this safe space to get feedback from the employees, from the top down. They also held a community open house. And this is something that I have passed along to every business that I have interacted with. And that's really, they invited about 12 local nonprofits from their area. They sat them down, invited them to their facility. They had a tour. And then they said, here's what we do. Here are our challenges right now. Here are the barriers our employees are experiencing. Who can help and what can you do? And from that, they developed 3 different partnerships. One organization that provides on-site English lessons to their employees free of charge. So I think it's like an hour a week, and they all kind of get together in a room and the teacher guides them through. It's paid. And then another to help with driver's license testing. So training for that, because, in their mind and their kind of motto is, we're building better citizens, right? We're building people up so they have the access and the resources that they need to be effective members of our community. And then the last one that they did is develop some transportation, partnered with a gentleman who just happened to have a bus for another gig, and now transports some of their employees back and forth to work. So I love to share this example. This organization, has obviously done a lot for their employees, educated themselves a lot. They have really strong partnerships with other refugee resettlement agencies and really strong roots in the immigrant community. They're actually an immigrant-owned business too. So just a real strong passion for cultural competency, for getting to know the individuals, kind of some of those best practices that we talked about today, creating that kind of safe place, developing an individualized approach to leaders. So that's one of my favorite, success stories that I've heard, and such a collaborative effort.
And I love that their mission is driven on building better citizens, because in Minnesota, it's very hard to rely on mass transportation and to find a person that owns transportation so that barrier is not in the way to get them to work. That's innovative and really, really great. Thank you. How about you, Aubrey? What are your thoughts? Any success stories? I know you've shared some already.
Oh yeah. So this is one of my favorite success stories. And I actually, as part of my DEI certificate, I think I sent you the article, Jebeh, so maybe we can share it with people after this. But there's this really great article called 39 Types of Diversity that I was exposed to through my DEI certificate. And I just I have it just next to me all the time, because it's so helpful to think about how wide diversity can be. So the story I'm sharing is, so Maurice's is a retailer here, not necessarily a small business, but this happened at just one store. And I think Whitney was actually in the focus group with me, but Maurice's, their CAO shared that they had hired an associate with Down syndrome, and they saw the store sales go up 20% after that hire, because people came just to interact with her because she was so friendly and so lovely and so amazing at her job. And I had like chill bumps. I'd never heard of like that kind of like immediate metric. And that just really proves the business case for diversity. Like, it's there. Yes. She became like this like amazing brand ambassador basically for this store, where people were coming just to see her. And I think we all know somebody like that. We all know that like employee, like maybe it's like a regular person at the coffee shop where you're like, oh, that's my favorite person, you know. And just the fact that that girl was that to so many people, I just think is incredible. Another story I think of is when I was growing up, I was 15 years old. My mom would drive me to work, and we would stop at Arby's in the morning and get a breakfast sandwich. And there was this sweet woman named Shirley who must have been past 65. And I always kind of wondered, if was she doing the job for fun? Did she need to work, you know? And we were just so excited to see Shirley every morning. And that's another, you know, diversity facet we don't really think of, age.
Yes.
You know, like bringing our seniors into the workforce. And I just remember that when Shirley passed away, they put "We love you, Shirley" up on that billboard. And you could just tell, like, Shirley was their person. Like, Shirley was the one that we were going through the drive-through for. So it's just like this inclusion work we're talking about is such a powerful thing. And thinking about like a small business, maybe you only have a 4-person team, right? And if those 4 people have so many different kinds of diversity, you know, you're going to bring so many people in there that are going to make those really special memories with a person. Like, they're going to have a Shirley that they want to come in and, you know, maybe they want to buy clothes from her, or they want to get a breakfast sandwich. And I just think there's so much power there in inclusion and really like making those connections. And like, I'll remember those 2 stories for the rest of my life. I'll remember Shirley, and I will remember the Marisa story about those sales going up 20%. And like, I'm only sad that I didn't get to meet her. I'm like, I want to go to the store and meet the associate. Like, I want to be like in that magic moment with everybody.
Yeah.
So I think just thinking about the potential that a small business could have to have those stories and to create those people and give those people those chances, I think is really incredible.
That's awesome, Aubrey. And there's so many identities too that are diverse, that a lot of us in small business feel like, well, by my naked eye, this is all I see. And that's not it. There's so many different intersectionalities about that. Yes. Shea, what about you? Any success stories of the work you do?
Yeah, there's so many to mention that I
know.
want to be conscious of time. So thank you for this. And I give kudos to my fellow panelists for the examples they've given. So I'll list a few that I thought hit for me very much. I'll give a brag to my current organization, the Minnesota Child Welfare Training Academy. We have a couple things on site at one of our facilities to ensure that staff as well as guests know that their background is welcome and always seen and not ignored. A room for mothers to prepare, to nurse, to pump is huge. To know that there are parents at work each day that have young children at home that they still have to prepare for when they are at work or after work, to know that they can go somewhere to focus and not be bothered. So a nursing room is important. A prayer room. We have a prayer room for those who do have certain religious backgrounds, to let them know that if they want to have a space that they can feel safe or brave to honor their religious leader or faith, that they can do that consciously. Those are just some of the things that I guess I can think of for the training academy. For recruitment, some organizations have been very clear to acknowledge that they will still consider candidates with criminal backgrounds. To call that out very clearly and to understand that there is a culture that is tied to how we look at people with criminal backgrounds is huge. So individuals or organizations who are very clear about like, hey, we are open to hiring candidates who are former felons or who have a criminal background is huge, because you're putting it out there that we still want to talk to you. And let's be honest, as more baby boomers leave the job market, there's going to be a need and a huge gap for these blue collar jobs to be filled. And a lot of these blue collar companies are going to be targeting individuals who probably have some form of a criminal record, because it's just obvious that they need work too.
Yes.
And then one other organization that I actually worked with in the midst of the pandemic, their approach to marketing their services to potential customers was just saying, just let's have a conversation. What is your biggest need? What is your biggest challenge with the services that you currently don't have or do have? And they were just trying to come with a lens of, we don't know what you need, but tell us what you need. And maybe we can meet that need. And they were very open. And if we can't meet that need, we will openly refer you to an organization that can. So the idea of like competition, which we know capitalism does definitely encourages, just says that, hey, if that's not my specialty, the best thing I can do is refer you to someone who I know who does that. And maybe you'll remember that I was out looking out for you when you needed a referral resource. So those are just some of the examples that come to mind.
I love it. Referrals. And again, marginalized groups that have been shunned away from the workforce, because of a past, thing. So that's also very important. Awesome. All right. I know we are kind of getting close with time, and I want to remind folks that are watching and listening to put in your responses in the polls of your opinions, because we'll share that as part of our Q&A at the end. We're going to get to number 4. How can small businesses ensure that their products and services are both culturally relevant and accessible to diverse communities? Aubrey, I want you to start with that one.
I would say, just like we've kind of mentioned already, but like asking for feedback.
Feedback.
Surveys are, I think, a super underutilized tool. Like, I built the Women in Leadership Conference on surveys alone. Like, we had 220 women fill out that survey, and I was like, here's the agenda, put it together, done. I didn't have to think about it. I didn't have to think, what do people want to see? It was right there on the paper. So just being brave enough to ask, and going into the spaces where you can ask those populations. Like, I try to volunteer at Juneteenth. I table at the Northland BIPOC Business Showcase, and I bring chamber materials, and I want to ask, like, what can we do to create value? Have you ever thought about joining the chamber? What can we be doing better? I want to hear from you. And just like showing up there is a huge deal, So even at, like, start by attending, network, like try going to Pride. We have Trans Joy Fest here. There are so many things that our chamber sponsors, tables at, attends, and just asking and saying, like, this is what we're trying to do better. These are the things we offer. Do you know about, do you know about my small business? I'd love to talk to you about it. Here's my card. I'd love to hear about, like, what kind of services we could be providing, or what kind of products you're looking for. If you have any feedback, it's a little scary, like, asking for honest feedback sometimes, but I thrive off of it. I look at everything as an opportunity to improve, and I just say, like, if you never join the chamber, my job is done, because I'm here. I just want you to know I'm here and I'm ready to help. And if you don't see value in it, that's totally okay, but I'm so glad to have met you. And that's how I really end every, meeting, just saying, like, I'm so glad we had this connection, and just coming into it with no expectations. So
yeah, that's great. How about you, Shea?
Sorry, I was on mute because I was getting excited about all the things that Aubrey was sharing there. I think feedback is a good one. This might be the first time that I'm going to intentionally try to be devil's advocate and also give another aspect to what Aubrey was sharing. And that is, I attended the Black Men Healing Conference earlier this year. And one of the things I think was mentioned at said conference is that sometimes individuals use surveys and forms and processes in place of relationships. So I think sometimes it's important to really rely on relationships that you have, that got in the business that you do have, to say, hey, what am I missing here? Can you give me some perspective on how I can tap into some groups, cultures, sectors that I'm not seeing? So sometimes your customers are your biggest resource, because they're the ones that are giving you the business. So I think sometimes it's really important to understand what aspects of your services or products aren't hitting all marks. Now, that said, it's very it could be a challenge to try to say you're going to hit every benchmark. I want it to be racially appropriate. I want it to attract LGBTQIA2 Spirit Plus communities. that's a lot. But to that end, it could also speak to, hey, do you know anybody that represents these communities I'm trying to tap into? Can you refer me to someone that you work with? Does anyone in your sector or circle know that? So I think that while feedback is important and a survey can help, having that true dialogue, I think sometimes people really value, especially a customer, when they know, if you think about it, right, how many restaurants say, hey, if you do the survey, you'll get $5 off your next visit. Well, whether you give them a discount or not, the reality is you want to have that feedback, but make it intentional. Schedule a conversation. Can I invite you to coffee? Can we have lunch and talk about what things you might be missing or overlooking?
Love that. And yeah, Whitney, what other thoughts that you have on this too?
Yeah, I mean, pretty aligned with what's already been said. I think I would say, I have a lot of businesses who I'll say, how do your employees think you're doing? And they'll say, I don't know. How do I know? And I'll say, you have to ask them, right? So along the same lines, educate yourself, conduct market research. Maybe it's focus groups. Maybe it's, meetings with culturally relevant, community-based organizations or partners, experts like yourself or some of the other panelists here to bounce ideas off of. I think it's really about educating yourself, asking the hard questions. And, I guess the thing that hasn't really been mentioned is, be willing to adapt and modify, right? And understand that cultural preferences and individual learning types and ways of, functioning in a daily, work day vary by individual, and that can trickle into how your consumers are served as well. So be willing to adapt, welcome that feedback. It likely will be constructive criticism, and understand that making these modifications is only intended to make you better.
Awesome. All right, we have 2 more questions left before we jump into Q&A. We're going to start with you, Shea. What are some common challenges that small businesses face when they're trying to implement cultural competency initiatives?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to jump in on this question because I get excited when I think about challenges. I think there's like one famous quote that says, like, I ate problems for breakfast, right? But the idea here is that you should anticipate pushback. If you're not, then I think you're assuming that what you're going to have is some bias of groupthink. You've hired a bunch of people who are yes men or yes women, who every idea that comes to the table, they're like, yep, we should do that. But anticipate, like, well, what am I missing? There's a concept of idea of like having someone who's on your team or your staff who is the dissenter, who says, well, what are we missing? Can I disagree intentionally to give you a different perspective? So what are some things that I think that individuals should keep in mind when implementing culturally competence initiatives is lack of knowledge. You don't know what you don't know. So there is a lot of fear-based thinking when it comes to, again, Jebeh, I'll touch on, again, the IDI continuum with the denial and polarization thinking, which is individuals who don't know something think that it just doesn't exist. Or if they do know something, they think of like, well, that's not me. So clearly we're different. Instead of leaning in to the discomfort. Well, I don't know that. Can you educate me? Hey, can I ask some questions so that way we can really start a conversation and try to see where we can fill some gaps? I think the best thing any leader of an organization can do is go to their frontline workers and go, hey, what do you see on a daily basis that I, as the top of the leader, may not see from my perspective? I think that's really how you're kind of trying to stay grounded, is to say, what am I missing? And some people are challenged to even engage with their top competitors to see what are they doing that you can either learn from or do differently or do similar. But I think ultimately you always want to look at the situation from a different perspective. What advantage points are you not looking for?
I love that. What's missing? What is the pushback? Because you will get pushback. And when you get pushback is when you're doing something right. Yeah, for sure. Aubrey, what are your thoughts on that? Any challenges that you can give an example of?
I so agree on preparing for the pushback piece. Like change resistance is like you're like pushing a bull. Like it's, and I've been up against that, and my motto is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I don't stop talking. I'm like, this isn't, really aligned with our DEI values. all of our speakers are white. There are 10 speakers on this page. We can do better. Oh, there she goes again. You know, that fuels me. That fuels me. I eat problems for breakfast as well, Shea. So, but you have to be ready for it. Like, you can't have a thin skin because people are going to get irritated and they're going to go, why are you doing this? Our president fields calls like, why is the chamber leading DEI? We never did this. And he goes, I hear you're struggling with your workforce. Do you want to talk about how DEI could help you with those problems? So he handles that really beautifully, but you have to be ready for the change resistance. But I also think small business owners don't have time. Like, a lot of times, like, they're like, I want to come to your DEI workshops, but it's 8 to 12, and that's during my store hours, you know, and they may not have a big enough staff or big enough resources. So something I always try to provide at each DEI workshop is like a different action plan that can be tailored to your business, because what works for the solopreneur is not the same thing that's going to work for a big company like Maurice's. And SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based, that's very important too. I was really happy because our last DEI workshop was about inclusive recruitment and retention. And there were 3 bearded men that came in from a local bike shop, and they had never come to a chamber event that I had seen. And they came for the inclusive recruitment and retention. And they told me, like, we want to do a better job with our hiring. And 3 white men in beards. It was awesome. Like, I am so happy you're here. And they wrote their own action plan. And I was like, it's so cool that they were able to take the time. And all 3 of them came together, and they were talking in their small group, and they were writing, and they were so engaged. So it's possible, you know, so they made the time, they were able to make it work. And maybe, you know, if you're a solopreneur, that's going to look a little different for you, but it really impressed me that all 3 of them came. And so, yes, there's a lack of time, but maybe there's a day you can make it work, or maybe there's someone that could cover for you. So, you know, or maybe there's a day that you just bring your whole staff together and you brainstorm and you make that action plan together. I think that's so powerful. And asking for help, like hiring someone like Jebeh and saying, I need help. I don't know what I'm doing, like leaning on people that know better. They came because they wanted to learn. And I think that's really powerful.
That's awesome, Aubrey. Thank you for sharing that. Whitney, how about you? A challenge that you've heard from your clients, business owners?
Yeah, I mean, resistance to change obviously is a big one. And I think my advice to business owners is, you know, have a strategy, have a mission, have a vision, ensure that your employees understand the why behind this work. Why are you focusing time and energy, you know, on cultural competency, and what is a benefit that could provide to your organization? So similar to, you know, what Aubrey said about her president having kind of a pitch or talking points when he's speaking to individuals, ensure that your leaders are armed with that information. The other big challenges, you know, are lack of resources. I know time has already been discussed, but money is another big one, and just other priorities, right? A lot of small to mid-sized businesses that I have worked with, you know, have one HR person who does everything under the sun, right? And that's typically where these initiatives fall. And I think there's a challenge with, you know, it just being pushed on to the HR person who maybe doesn't have the expertise or the resources or information they need to drive this work. So another kind of, you know, solution to that is identifying internal champions and building partnerships with other organizations, a strong professional network, and engaging in conversations there. Starting small and making, you know, baby steps, and being okay with that.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a old Ethiopian proverb that says, hurry has no blessing. Like, those baby steps we need to take. I love how you had all said, you know, priorities can be a challenge. Investment, if there's no resources or money, a solopreneur might have only a small budget to do, you know, professional development training, and the time could be a constraint. But I also like how, you know, Shea even said, you know, when we have the pushback and the resistance and the polarization, we also need to recognize that as well. And how can we get those friends that are in that polarization camp into the buy-in of why it's important to do this work in order to move forward. Because like Whitney said, the data doesn't lie. Like there's a lot of money to be made. And even Aubrey too, 20% increase in sales, that is like a dream, and that's something that we need to invest our time and our money to build those efforts. So this is wonderful. We have a few more minutes, and just one quick takeaway from each of you that you could, just give to our listeners in this webinar, that maybe just a little nugget of just 2-cent nugget, like, okay, if I could walk away from this webinar, this is what I want you to know. We'll start with you, Aubrey.
I would say every DEI journey starts with a conversation. So my DEI journey started with a conversation with a local activist, and I asked him, who do I need to know and what do I need to know? And I bought him coffee and I bought a meal to make sure it was worth his time. But that opened my world. Like, he gave me a list, and I'm still working through that list. Like, I'm still making relationships from that list. And he's like, these are the people you need to know. And I can't thank him enough. Like, that was really the person that got me started. So just start with a conversation. It could really open up a lot of doors.
Love that. Love that. How about you, Shea?
Yeah, intentionality goes a long way. So be intentional. I think even kind of combining some things I've heard earlier. Be intentionally curious, and know that the journey is ever growing. So intentionally ask questions. Intentionally invest in the communities that you see potential profit from. Now, I know, unfortunately, some people say, oh, you're going to profit off communities. Well, be intentionally curious first before you look to profit off of them. But understand their struggles. Understand what makes them tick. Learn them. And you have to really be intentional about the relationship before you can truly feel like they can bring you business. But if anything, try to bring them resources before you look for something in return.
That's true. Whitney, how about you?
I think my little piece of advice is it's never too late to start. I speak to a lot of businesses who have some shame or maybe embarrassment that they haven't yet begun this work. And my goal is to let them know it's never too late to start, right? There's no shame in embarking on this journey today or tomorrow. So even if this is the first step you're making, continue the momentum. I guarantee that, engaging in DEI work will make you a better individual. It'll make you a better friend. You'll meet new people that you would have never met and learn new things, eat new delicious foods, which, really brings people together. So never too late to start.
I love that. Thank you all. And I'm just looking at the polls, and yes, we have resounding for number one question was, how important do you think cultural competency is for small businesses in connecting with diverse customer bases? All four said extremely important. Second question was, in your experience, how challenging is it for small businesses to attract and retain diverse talent? And majority said somewhat challenging. And just how you three had said, time, money, investment, pushback, resistance, that can also come into play. How confident are you that your business is culturally relevant and accessible to diverse communities? And majority again said somewhat confident. And there's one friend that said they're not very confident. So I'm hoping that this helped, stir up some ideas and strategies of what we just shared tonight. And our last one, poll question said, what is the biggest challenge your small business face when trying to implement these cultural competency initiatives? And a majority said, yes, limited resources. And so I love how all three of you had put in your LinkedIn profile so they can connect with you in the future to help them with those limited resources, to gain those resources that is so needed and vetted by you experts in this panel. Thank you all. We just have about, I want to say 5 more minutes. If there is someone in the chat that would like to share any questions that they may have. I see some friends had left a little early, but just one more thing before we go. You can get the replay of this webinar if you sign into the newsletter sign up sheet. The link is in the chat. And before we go, are there any questions that you might have? I'm opening it up. You can open up your mic, and we have time for just 2 questions to our panel.
No, I just wanted to express my gratitude for being another guest on one of your wonderful, webinars, Jebeh. So thank you so much for this opportunity and time. And I look forward to keeping in touch and being a resource to your guests for those who were able to join us tonight. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Shea. That means a lot. Yes. Yes. Oh, this was just, like I said, I bring the best of the best with me. I'm learning so many new things from you all too. And thank you for sharing your stories and, best practice and evidence. A lot of us get like Whitney said, that shame of, oh, I'm too late. And she also reiterated, it's never too late to start. And I think we need to learn to muster up that courage and that brave space of saying, yes, I'm here. I'm curious. I want to learn more. And so this has just been wonderful. Yeah, so that's all that we have. It seems like we have friends still processing, and that's okay. Feel free to email me at info@jebehedmunds.com if you have any other questions that I can answer for you. And thank you all again for joining us on this very insightful webinar on cultural competency and small business. Have a great night, and I'll see you here next time. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Aubrey. And thank you, Shea.